Is 8:01. And on that note, Jenny, off to you to kick us off.
Let's find a deck for those who are watching their screen and those who are listening. Well, and if you're watching your screen too, good morning and welcome. So before we get going on our customary land acknowledgement, a couple of logistical pieces for you. If you are new to us for the first time, do let us know in the chat. Welcome. This is our 85th episode, Craig. Did you know that? There's a number. Yeah.
There is a number.
Very cool.
Yes.
Down below on your toolbar, you'll see a chat and you can see it in use already. There's also a Q&A button, and that button's really important. If you have a question, please put your question in the Q&A so that Craig can find it quickly and easily. You also have the option in there, if you need to make it anonymous. That's absolutely your choice. The picture on your screen, if you're looking at your screen, is downtown Calgary. This is last week. You can see that fabulous, well, you can't see that it's a line of trees, a little avenue of trees outside Heritage Hall. And you get the time of day right, it's one of the best views of the city. Originally known as McIntus, which means I should say traditionally known, not originally, traditionally known as McIntus. It's the Indigenous name for Calgary. And the meeting of two rivers, the Bow River and the Elbow River. We are, as said, located on traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the people of the Treaty 7, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Îyârhe Nakoda of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney. We're also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Thanks, Craig.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. So this morning, if you're just joining us, we were chatting a little bit about the Oilers hockey game last night, and I'm not going to belabor the hockey for those of you who do not care. But I have to use last night, Jenny, as a little bit of an example leading into what we're talking about today.
Okay.
So in overtime, Trent Frederic got cross-checked in the face. Oiler got cross-checked in the face. In that instance, the officials have an option of calling a 2-minute penalty, a 4-minute penalty, or a 5-minute major. When they call the 5-minute major, it gives them the option to go and watch the tape, take a review, and see if they missed anything, and to see if it actually was a 5-minute major. In this case, it was. The resulting power play, we won't belabor. But the point being is, they have the option of checking their blind spots, right? Did they miss something? Did they not? And today we're here to talk about blind spots. And as we were prepping for this conversation, I think maybe it's important for us to try and to define what a blind spot is to start with. Right? Because I was kind of joking with you, and I said, I think we've talked ourselves into a corner with this topic of saying leadership blind spots, because as a leader, how am I supposed to know if it's a blind spot, if it is a blind spot? So there you
Yes.
go.
There you go. It's actually just a good example with the Oilers.
Oh,
Nice.
thanks.
Nice transition. Well done. So it's funny, isn't it? Because if they're no longer a blind spot, then you don't have that blind spot. But the technical definition, and it's a little, I don't know, it's lots of big words, systemic distortions in self-perception. Like really what that means, yeah, exactly. It's a bit much for a Friday morning. Things that
So you can see why we didn't use that as a title.
exactly. But really what they are simply is the things that we don't know about ourselves, but other people see them really clearly. And they often get caught, especially in leadership, between an intention and an impact. So we always talk about the gap between your intention and your impact. Your impact is how it landed. Obviously, your intention is how you wanted it to go. And so I think that's probably the simplest way to be there. We don't know about it. Other people see it clearly. And so that option to see that TV playback is a really good one, because especially as a ref, like there's so much that you can't see. We see the world from our own one perception, our own view that we're in at that time, and there's so many other versions of that.
Yeah. And it is interesting, right? Because as a leader, I was thinking about this. I think you can probably sense it sometimes.
Yeah.
I guess there's going to be a spectrum, right? You're going to have some leaders who are entirely oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, should they actually be in that leadership position? How did they get there? What's going on? That's another TED Talk. but I think you can probably sense, right? You have those moments when maybe you think, oh, that didn't land right, or you leave a meeting, and you go, that wasn't the best meeting,
Mhm.
or you just have a feeling, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question then is, if you are a leader committed to trying to figure out what your blind spots might be, how do you do so?
Okay, there's a lot of really important pieces in there because one of the things that you tapped on is, are you willing to dig into that self-awareness? And
Mm,
are you willing to listen to maybe feedback, maybe information that you may not want to hear? And this happens a lot. Our intentions are good, and yet the way they landed wasn't so successful. And the other thing that I think is one of the key pieces is people often say, I don't get any feedback. And it's true. The higher up you go as a leader, the feedback becomes a little bit more dull. Like people aren't, they're not necessarily brave, they're not necessarily rich with it. And it's all via a formal loop. And so we lose that spontaneous piece. So the onus sits on us as a leader to read those micro pieces of feedback. So success always in your communication is that immediate feedback of how it landed. And to your point, if that feedback from me that I don't like it is as simple as a tight tension or they lean back just slightly, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it.
yeah.
And that's really difficult. So that level of listening isn't just listening to how I respond, it's the whole thing. What else is going on and picking up on that.
Yeah, and what that makes me think too is, if you're so that's probably easier in that one-on-one conversation, right? If you're paying
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
In this dynamic right now, probably much more difficult, though we've probably adapted over the last 4 or 5 years of figuring out how to watch for those body language cues in these situations, even though if you're staring at the camera, you're now catching it all out of your peripheral vision instead. But if you're sitting in that meeting room, and you're trying to watch an entire group,
Yeah.
right? There's another angle. If your written communication is generating zero response, does that tell you something?
Yeah.
I don't know. I I guess I guess what I'm getting at is, why can it be so difficult for even experienced leaders to, and it sounds so obvious, to see their blind spots. So let's
Yeah.
just let's
I-
let's let's let that go, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I think the key thing is who's in your sort of trusted squad? Like who are your true allies? Maybe it's the right word. Because even in a team meeting, like here's what we don't practice. Let's say you're holding a meeting and you've got, I don't know, 8 people and I'm in that meeting. The simple piece is, okay, Jenny, I'm really curious as to how this is going to land today. I'm going to ask you not to look at me while I'm talking, but can you look at the rest of the group? Like see what
Um,
you can see. And then, or see what you notice. And then at the end of the meeting, okay, how did that land? What did you notice? And and here's the big if, and we talk about this all the time. First off, we have to have the relationship that will allow that conversation to flow, which means we've got to have the psychological safety and the trust and everything else in there. We also have to have the space and time. Like, I think that's a key to what you said too. Often we deliver, we notice maybe, but we don't have time to deal with that because we're on to the next meeting that's back to back, and then the next meeting that's back to back. And by the time we get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're like, probably not that important. I'll keep an eye on it next time. And then we have to remember next time. So it's got to be intentional. And that's often where we fall down because we have so much going on.
yeah. If you think about, then to your point that, that 3 p.m., that 4 p.m., oh crap, I forgot to follow up on that. I saw that at 8 o'clock this morning. Yeah, you know what? There's way too much going on. Let's call it a day and move along. And
Mhm.
maybe I was overreading it. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But what if it was?
Yeah.
I think that would be my question for leaders out there is, what if it actually was in that moment a big deal to the individual that, you sense that from? And so I guess there's a couple things that I think about here is, one, what are those signals maybe that a leader should be looking for? We've kind of touched on a couple of them, watch the body language, the response to communication, etc. But is it ever too late to go back and ask?
I think it's really important to recognize that it isn't too late, especially if you're concerned that it didn't land the way you wanted it to. And we can talk ourselves out of it really, really quickly, but as leaders, especially, the impact that we have is considerable. And, you can pretty much whisper something, and to somebody else, it sounds like you're shouting it at them. And so I don't think it is too late. And if it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon, full credit to you for following back up. Look, and it could be as quick as a Teams note. It could be picking up the phone. It could, and at this point, it's a really little conversation. But if it continues, and this is where that sort of systemic piece comes in the original definition, the impact on engagement is huge. The
Yeah.
impact on people's want and ability to speak up is huge. So I think that following up is really important. And when you capture it early, it's a small conversation and you build trust through that sincerity and that care. And that's huge for you as a leader as well. And then to your other part, how do we notice it? The feedback, the immediate feedback is really important. Like, so the body language, the words that are used, faces are huge. Most people, not everybody, most people, you'll get an awful lot just by that eye piece, which does make it when we're working virtually quite difficult. But if you're face to face, that's useful. But then there are other things such as, you get the same question 3 times in a row. Or to your point, you get the same dead end silence 3 times in a row. They're patterns. And when you start to see a pattern, have a conversation about that pattern. And the sooner you do that again, the smaller and the easier the conversation is. Let it build up, and then it's a bigger, harder conversation.
Yeah. So how do you, let's touch on that pattern piece then a little bit then, right? So if you are in that spot where you are trying to generate engagement, generate involvement, you kind of had that conversation with the team. Is it sometimes somebody doesn't want to be the first one on the team to be the one to engage in that communication? Like, how do you start to interrupt that pattern and draw it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is going to depend on the team.
Yeah.
And the dynamics of the team and how that works. I think that's a really good point. Judgment will hold us all back. We're, as human beings, we do, in most cases, sit in a fear of judgment. And people they say this all the time, no judgment zone. Well, we're wired to judge. We judge all the time. And so getting to a no judgment zone is really, really difficult. So one of the things that we can work with teams in, especially when we're in group conversation, is that are you joining the conversation or are you judging the conversation? And so in those kind of spaces, we're really looking for language. And when people sort of interpret a story or interpret a situation, that's going to come from a judgment that they're looking for it to match their belief. But if we're observing, what I notice is, or I have observed, or what occurs to me, those are sort of your classic sentences, then that's more of a, here's where it's coming from on my behalf, but I'm really interested to hear the different versions. And so it's kind of, the problem with all of this is it's so micro. We have to get used to noticing the subtle differences between two different versions.
Yeah. And sometimes picking up on subtleties is not the strength of some, right?
No.
And the question that came out in the chat here earlier, and folks, please, if you've got questions, do not hesitate to throw them in the Q&A and let us know. But it was kind of going back to that moment earlier when we were talking about, it's 3 p.m. I should have talked about it at 9. At 9 a.m., the question essentially is, can you call it out and mention you aren't prepared and you recognize that we may need to talk about this later?
So call out on yourself. Like,
Yeah, or the call out on that moment.
I think so. And I think owning it is incredibly human. I mean, that's the other part in all of this. We are not going to get this right 100% of the time. There's a reason one of the biggest leadership blind spots is not knowing that you have blind spots. Like, that's how simple all of this is. We all have them. They occur at different times. And this self-awareness, self-reflection and self-awareness is the biggest part of this puzzle. So we don't have to dive into it, but something that most people will be familiar with is Johari's window. And that's a great tool. We were laughing about this previously. It's another 2x2 matrix. Woohoo. And it's useful, except that it's not useful if you're not prepared to dig into the self-reflection and self-awareness and say, actually, I have these and they might be getting in the way. So how am I going to create an environment where it's safe enough to have them uncovered, where it's safe enough to have that conversation? And so once you step into that and your awareness, you pick up on something and you own it, well, that elevates you in that whole human, vulnerable, transparent, whatever words that you want to use. And most people have that compassionate piece in there too, where they're like, oh, I get that here. I'm with you. Let's
Yeah.
make this better. But yeah, it is a vulnerability to step into that and own it in there.
Oh, absolutely. And let's lean into this a little bit more because we have a question here around what do you mean by the 2x2 or the
Okay,
Johari's window? So
sorry.
maybe we want to show it,
Yeah.
right? You want
Okay, that's going to take us a
uh,
second. Hang on.
that's okay. We
We
can do that.
can. It's a very full slide, which we know is not my favorite.
It's all
Um,
good.
but let's do that. Hold on one second. Okay, so Johari's window came from two researchers whose names were Joseph and Harry, and they put the two names together and made Johari. That's how it came about. So what you've got there, for those of you who can see the screen, is if you think of a window, on the top half of the window, everything that's known to others. So everybody can see that about you. And on the bottom half of the window, things that are not known to others. And then on the vertical, you have known to self. You're very clear and you're aware of these. And on the other side of the vertical, not known to yourself. And so the spot, or the hidden area, as they call it typically, is what's known to others and not known to self. Those are your blind spots. That's where they hang out. On the other side there, where you know about it and others know about it, I think typically they call that the arena. That's the bit that's often most talked about. We're pretty comfortable in there, and that's where we want to try and move most things to. Bottom left, as you're looking at the screen, other people don't know, but you know, right? These are the things that we choose to keep hidden, and that's okay for the most part, right? There are some things when we're in leadership that actually be really helpful for your team to know, that when you're over capacity or overextended or simply stressed, this is how you behave. This is how you'll talk. A lot of people work to keep them hidden, but the more we move some of those things into that arena area, top left, the more helpful it is for our team members, the easier it is for us to get on. And then bottom right, not known to you, not known to others, right? That's just, we don't know. And sometimes they'll emerge. There might be a wonderful area down there. Sometimes we never, ever, ever find these out. They're so deep and buried within us. So that's Johari's window.
Perfect.
As it says on the left, though, you do need to sort of want to dig into that self-awareness. And anytime we talk about self-awareness and self-reflection, there is a piece of self-acceptance as well. And sometimes people find that quite hard too.
Yeah. So you've touched on a couple things that I want to dive into, and I'm going to preface this with a little story about I was in India about a month ago. And for those of you who are on with us who have been in India and experienced traffic, it's a very different situation than perhaps driving along the QE2 or Crowchild, et cetera. But I was chatting with one of the drivers because I could not understand how folks could navigate. And he basically said, and I'm holding my hands up to a 45 to my eyes, if you're just listening, he says, all I look for is out and slightly in front of me on either side. He says, if there's a space, I go. I'm not watching my blind spots. Whoever's behind me, it's up to them. to pay attention to my blind spot. And it works for everybody because everybody does it that way. But my point being is I don't think as a leader, you want to be looking for your team to watch for your blind spots and just stay out of your way, right? So, you touched on something there about, you need to be self-aware and leaning into it. So what does it look like for a leader to be genuinely interested in trying to uncover their blind spots?
That's a good question. Um, I think it's right back to the feedback conversation that we've been having over several of our conversations now. And the real flip, the way that we're starting to look at feedback, feed forward, as you'll often hear me call it, is go looking for it. But it's those tiny snack bite pieces of it. So it's asking, if you think there was a sort of change in somebody's body language, or you think that it might be an area where you don't often find success, or you've been very, very comfortable. That's another place where blind spots grow, because you've been successful. You'll do it the same way, and you'll do it the same way because it was successful the first time.
Yeah.
And taking one, two, maybe three people who will have literally three different perspectives on it and ask them just to notice, how does this land? Or, how do I take on the challenge in a meeting? If somebody challenges me in a meeting, how do I respond to that? What are you noticing? And just ask for those areas of feedback. But the other part that's interesting in there is we're often not very good at picking up what's referred to as hidden feedback. So people find it really difficult still until we build the skill sets. This will always be difficult. They find it difficult to give feedback very specifically because we don't want to hurt feelings. We don't want to be disliked. There's all those sort of usual things within there. So we'll skirt around the subject a little bit. We won't simply say, Craig, I don't know if you know this, blah, yeah, yeah. So I think as a leader, it's basically upping that perception game and listening, always listening to learn. Maybe that's the best way to sum it up.
Mm.
And so if somebody offers you something, and if you hear those words, could I offer you something I've noticed? Or could I offer you some feedback? Like, that's a gift. Somebody says that to you.
Yeah.
Then immediately, how do we click into that? Okay, I need to listen to learn here. It may not be my version, but the fact that they want to tell me and they're offering to tell me, this is important. And then we can learn from there. And some of them are so useful. One of mine, when I listen to somebody, I have the worst scowl ever. Like if I'm concentrating, you will think I'm in the worst mood ever. Like it looks like I'm scowling. And simply, that's just the kids have a wonderful term for it. We'll just use resting face on here. But now that I know about it, I will always fill people in ahead of time because I don't want them to think that. That's me paying attention.
Right.
Unfortunate, but that's what it is.
No, there's nothing wrong with resting listening face. So,
Thank you.
right. That's you can use that one going forward.
All right, we got.
Um, and so, but you touched on something important there too, because as a leader, if you're genuinely
Mhm.
trying to lean into this, you know, it's it's that act of, because if you've never been good at this before, making it safe to actually receive and listen to feedback. And then how do you keep yourself from being defensive if you're not
Mm.
good with it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Because if you haven't engaged in this act of receiving feedback, and I've in prior lives, we've done 180s, 360s, uh, some of that work with individuals who perhaps need some coaching and need their eyes opened a little bit, perhaps to how others are perceiving them. And I've had individuals who say, well, I'm willing to do that if I get to do the same to them, sort of thing. Clearly not a mind of receiving feedback as a gift. But so couple that, like, how do you avoid that defensiveness? How do you really just make it safe to receive feedback?
I think what we're talking about now is what some would refer to maybe culture of feedback, maybe feedback architecture. We have to normalize how this happens, and we don't. It's not normal, right? Feedback is saved for performance reviews, the occasional one-on-one, and we always wait for it to come, and then it comes as a tidal wave, and we still have people out there saying, can you give me some feedback, please? Like, that's the worst question you can ask anybody, because they don't know where to begin. And so how do we build that sort of practice into our normal everyday? And I think the easiest way for leaders to do that is make it part of their meetings, start to ask good questions, but those good questions are small and they're specific to one particular thing. And then the practice is the productive response. So if you're somebody that normally feels defensive, would react to that, you know this. Like, if that's you, you know this. And there are certain things. If somebody challenges me on X, I'm okay. I'm willing to learn from that. I'll grow in that space. But somebody challenges me on Y, no, that's my specialist area. I don't know that you have the right to challenge me. Who are you to talk? Like, the minute that self-talk changes, that's when we need that. It's almost like a composure moment. Like, if you're looking to not be defensive, all you have to do is give yourself time, because there's an instant reaction, and then about 6 seconds later, there's a response. And it's a breath, it really is, but it's catching, here's the self-awareness, it's catching the moment when it happens. So I guess the first thing, if this is really where you're starting, is to know that when we hit that defensiveness, it's going to happen in one of three ways. It's going to happen in your self-talk, it's going to happen in your body, or it's going to happen in your behavior. So, for example, your self-talk might be, don't you challenge me. You wouldn't ever say that out loud. Well, maybe you would, but hopefully you wouldn't. But it's still that background conversation. Maybe your heart rate immediately goes up, or you feel hot really quickly. Or maybe you're prone to that verbal eye roll where you physically roll your eyes or shake your head or whatever that might be. Any one of those three. There's your flag. Okay, just pause just for a second. Well, 6 seconds. And then and the beauty of that pause too is a better response will come to you. And it might be as simple as, that's new to me. Can you tell me more? Right? Or can you give me another example? Give yourself time. Give them a question.
Yeah, and yes, all of the above. And I think the other thing to acknowledge too is that it is probably okay to feel defensive or feel slighted,
Mhm.
right? It's personal,
It is personal.
but that's okay, right? But that's where, if you're really gonna get down into the weeds on this, you have to be willing to kind of take those hits. Um, it, it, Not that they're intended as hits, but they're gonna feel like them.
Mhm.
And the more you do it, the more you're gonna get used to it, and the more you're gonna realize how valuable the exercise
Yeah.
and the interaction can be.
And I think it's, if we look at it, it's how do we create the curiosity to how others perceive us?
Yeah.
We have a version, and most people don't get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to show up at work and be a complete and utter nuisance or sabotage somebody else's work or cause trouble for them. We just don't do that.
Yeah.
Most of us wake up with the intention to show up as a version that would be helpful, productive, like whatever it might be. And so that curiosity to how we are perceived by others, like, first off, they won't perceive you as you intend. We just don't. We have different perceptions. So let's find out more about that. And then if you choose to, you can change it to help. And here's the cool part too, your team are lots of different perception as well. So how you appear to one might not be how you appear to another. So this isn't a blanket fix at any one point.
Yeah.
So it's awareness and it's work, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
No, I'm just going through the chat and the questions here, and we've got some questions to get to. I think Tom hit the nail on the head here a little bit is when you're receiving that feedback, you can have a reaction and a response.
Yes.
Right? And as a leader, when you're receiving that feedback, I think it's that the thing to practice is how do you not react in the moment and take that pause to respond.
Mm.
Okay, so a couple of questions here on divergent ends of the scale. So the first one I'm going to pose here is, What if I always ask for feedback but never receive it?
So, a couple of things that may be there. Like this is very context specific.
Yep.
If you don't receive it, my first question is, do they have the skill set to offer it? And what I mean by that is if you are a high performer, I get this question a lot. Like, what if my report, my person who works for me, actually is fantastic? Right? And well, A, what a blessing. I hope you've told them that. And B, we sort of what do you want feedback on? Right? So if you've asked for feedback and you're not getting anything, they don't know where to start. So if you're at that point where you're willing to ask for feedback, which full credit to you, because that's huge. Not many people are willing to ask for it. So if you're ready to ask for feedback, just take an extra moment and say, what is the question that I want answered most? Or what would have the most impact on the work I do? So narrow it down, make it snack size. And then who are you asking for it? Because, really in the workplace, we often say, okay, the leader has to give the direct reports feedback. Well, actually, most of the work I do, like if we think about us, Craig, you could give me feedback, but the only time when we really see each other is here. But, I work for weeks and I don't see you. So I would be asking different people for feedback initially. So who are you asking and what are you asking for? I think those might be the two easiest pieces.
Okay, perfect. At the other end of the spectrum, as a leader, if everyone is giving you feedback, it can be overwhelming. How do you decide what feedback to take and what to leave? How do you know the feedback from employees is coming from a place of helping you grow and not derailing you? I'm not sure if I'm phrasing this right, but yeah. So on one end, you got nothing. On the other end, you're getting all sorts of stuff.
Mm.
You start.
Um, okay. So that's interesting actually, because for people to give it means you've set up the environment where that's okay. I'm very concerned that people would be trying to derail their leader. That's not a wonderful environment. So I would double check that that's
Yeah.
the intent there. That's a big conversation that needs to happen. I think one of the things that we do need to say as we've sort of leaned into this feedback part, and it's a huge part of blind spots, is feedback, two things with it. One, there's always a truth in it, right? There's always a truth. So when you get sort of a tidal wave of it or a rush of it, your job essentially is to look for the truth if you can. You might have to ask a few questions to uncover it. And then the other thing, and this is really important for givers and receivers, feedback is a choice, right? You can offer everything you want, but the person receiving it chooses whether they accept it and take action or reject it.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult for some people to handle. So if it's coming at you fast and furious, one, look at if you're asking for it. If you're not, you can probably channel it so that you're receiving it when you want to receive it. And then when you are receiving it, make sure you've got the clarity on it and then take your choice. If you found the truth, you take your choice from there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Another question that perhaps we might have to refer to our friend Curtis Braun, but maybe you might have some insight here. Well, let me start over. Any advice for neurodivergent leaders who don't pick up on social cues, facial cues? I know I'm not feeling qualified to answer that one, but
That is a good question. And I do not sit in a specialist area at this point when it comes to that. So I think I don't want to offer something that's just completely off tracks. In my mind, I'm thinking if you know that X and Y is difficult and you don't pick up on it, what works for you? And that becomes part of the team conversation. And so, when we're talking about feedback, it might be as simple as, look, I'm not going to pick up on the micro cues that you might give me. That's going to remain hidden. So when it comes to conversations about whatever, here's how to give it to me so that I can receive it well, or here's how to set me up so that I can give it to you for it to land well. I don't think I said that very well, but basically, you want to set yourself and them up for a better conversation. And if you know the answers to that and you can, sharing that will help everybody involved.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is I think what you're doing, Jenny, is you're trying to help. Um, I think you used the phrase earlier, some people are qualified and not qualified to give feedback. You're trying to
Mm.
help qualify them to give you the feedback the way you need to receive it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
and we talk about that a lot because we're all really different too. Like, in past we've scorned at feedback coming through email, but actually there's a great majority of people who, when you ask them, they would rather receive an email that says, gives 2 or 3 points all related to the same area, have the time to read that and digest it, and then have a conversation about it. And there's a whole other group of people who are like, oh, just tell me and we'll work our way through that. But we have to do the work up front to know who's who and how they'd rather receive it.
yeah. Um, I want to come back to something that you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
and that is, a leader under stress,
Mm.
right? And yeah, I'm going to just very blatantly guide this towards a conversation around Lumina and maybe touch on Lumina and the fact that it talks about us in our normal state, leader under stress, etc. Because I think part of your blind spots may be that they come out when you are stressed and you truly don't know versus when you're in your normal state, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's a good point. And one of the things that can help us in finding out where our blind spots sit are inventories or assessments. Let's say we use Lumina on the personality side and EQI 2.0 on the emotional intelligence side. Both are helpful in that space. Lumina measures in 3 different personas. So it's a little bit different than the other personality tests in that you actually get measurements on 24 different qualities in each of these 3 states. And our 3 states are our underlying state, us with no filter, comfort. You reserve that for a few people. And then we have our everyday state. That's how we choose to show up. You and I would be in our everyday state right now. There's a version of us that we deem appropriate to be on screen with hundreds of people. And then there's the overextended state. An overextension can happen by simply a word or a question, or it can build up over time in that kind of stress state. And what happens is most of what your strengths are in your everyday state become hindrances, not always, but most of the time, in our overextended state. So, take for example, if one of my strengths is the ability to have a tough conversation, one of the ways that that sometimes overextends is I will start an argument for the sake of it. And this isn't me, I'm making this up, by the way. And so then we hit that win at all costs, or that, that sort of argumentative streak, which isn't a very healthy version of what can be great in our everyday state. So those kind of assessments are really handy because they show us where we are likely to overextend and where we can put those sort of flags in place. If I know this is me, then that awareness of it helps. And one that, this was funny, but this hit me. One of my sort of big blind spots is I'm a huge people pleaser. Now, when you think of my job, that's actually what I have to do. Like, that's part of what I sign up for every day. But in my everyday life outside of that, that's not always helpful. So I can now catch the language in my head before I do or say something that helps me to say, I actually, I'm not going down that avenue. I've got the right to say no, or, whatever that might be in that space. So overextension can happen in a conversation. So where we get those instant reactions and what was a good conversation goes sideways, or it can happen over time. And again, it's that self-awareness. If you don't want to lean into inventories and assessments, it takes courage to dive into self-reflection. That's when you're going to have to ask the people that you trust and who care for you, who are around you.
Perfect. And that ties into the last question that we'll take before we wrap up. And that is, I'm struggling to think about how to go about doing some serious self-reflection. I would suggest I self-reflect on the surface, but maybe I need to do more. Do you have any recommendations? We just touched on a couple of them.
Mhm.
But anything else? Any other resources, any books, any ideas? If not now, we will make sure we put it in the follow-up.
Yeah, we I think we had a conversation in this series, maybe in January, Craig, on self-reflection itself. I think there's one that's titled that. So we'll put that in our follow-up email,
Yeah.
the link to there. There are some there are some free questionnaires that you can do that will sort of start you off. I'm a big fan of all of them. Positive Intelligence has one. Again, I'll put it into the email. Don't worry about catching it here. That email usually comes out beginning of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish. So
Yep.
watch for that. We'll put the links into there. And I think the other part is if you're aware, aware enough to think, I'm going to dig into this, maybe just take 2 weeks and just start to notice. Are you joining the conversation or judging the conversation? Are you supporting those people or not? Maybe. And notice where you're aware of changes in pattern or specific behaviors, perhaps, and then are someone who you have the care and the trust with, and step into the conversation.
Yeah. Cal Newport would suggest that that's a good use of like a single purpose notebook to carry
Yes.
around with you and jot down when you're noticing things and just have it focused purely on that. Cal Newport of deep work and slow productivity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, speaking of slow, we need to quickly transition to our wrap
Okay.
up. That was an awkward one. I couldn't find it, Jenny. I was trying to land the plane. I just couldn't get the segue.
You did well. You did well. Okay, so if you are new, yeah, we always finish with what was our big idea that sort of kickstarted this conversation for us. We aim for two, there might even be three today, applied strategies that you can take away and put into good use. So we might be able to add a little bit to what we were just saying there for that last question. And then we came up with, it was 1, 2, 3. So 3 questions to leave you thinking, and it's become a bit of a campaign now to have more than 3 questions. So we'll see where we got to this week. Craig counts the question marks on the slide. So our big idea that really sort of kicked this was how do we create those conditions to make it safe and normal to reveal the blind spots? First thing to totally be aware of is we all have them. So how are we going to work with that? And then a couple of things that we can do to help sort of make this happen. We talked about this a little bit today. How do you create those feed forward is my favorite version of this. The loops that aren't formal, get away. You have to have them, but don't wait for the performance review. Don't necessarily wait for the one-on-one, but have fast feedback, feed forward loops that are short and safe and they're frequent. So maybe at the end of meetings, maybe after a conversation, just dig in and say, would you mind if I asked you for a couple of things that you noticed? There's a couple of questions for you. These slides always come out with the email. You can access them. There's a PDF of them, so you can come back and find them as well. Second thing we have for you is work with a mirror and a map. I'm not sure whose statement that is, but it's quite clever. And so we know where we want to go. We know what we're striving for and aiming for. And who's that trusted person that will challenge your narratives, that will just hold you in check with that integrity. We didn't talk today about the ladder of inference, and often those with blind spots speed up that ladder of inference. So who have you got that will, challenge the way that you see things or your beliefs or your biases? We want to know who those people are and use them. And there you go. So there's 3 this week. Public learning. If you're a leader, especially tell your team, okay, I've become aware of this. That's the micro shift. And I'm going to ask you to notice for the next couple of weeks when I get it right. And if I don't get it right, and I'm going to offer that space for you to fill me in and help me learn public learning. Key with that is if somebody does help you, please think about your productive response, because that's everything to how much they'll help again. And yep, we blew it out the water. There's loads of question marks on there. More than 3 questions for you if you want to noodle, think about this. That last question on where do I start? You might be able to pick up 1 or 2 of these as a starting point just to contemplate. There we go.
Thank you. And I'm not even going to mention the question marks that were on the prior slides. So,
You're welcome.
and the one that's on this slide. But yes, thank you, Jenny. We are back on Friday, May 23rd, 2 weeks from now,
Yes.
to talk about motivation and high performance. So, have yourselves a wonderful weekend, folks, wherever you have joined us from. Hope the weather's fantastic for you. And go Oilers, go. And with that, Jenny, thank you. I appreciate you. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you, Craig.